his experience of going to Israel, and it's going to be real interesting for you. They told me when they got back that they took 1,400 pictures, and we're only 1,600 pictures. So we're going to be here for a while tonight. We picked out about 25 or 30 of those, and we put them on some slides. So these are the high points that I wanted to share with you about his trip. So that's what we're going to do. But before we do that, Miss D is going to come and talk to you about another aspect of this trip. And she's going to give you a testimony about the week before Al went on the trip. And that is a really interesting testimony. So maybe more powerful than the trip itself. But I want you to hear both of those. So Dee's going to come and share with us first. And then Al's going to take us through the slides and talk about his trip to Israel, okay?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Al had wanted to go to Israel for many, many years, but it just had not worked out. Our daughter Joy had been twice, and she loved it. She kept in touch with her favorite guides over there, and finally she decided that she wanted to take her daddy. And she began to pray with him about taking him over on a nice, slow trip, not on a tour group, as most people go. They planned where he wanted to go, and it would be they would build in some rest time if he needed it. A couple of Joy's friends planned to go also with them. They were ticketed to leave Atlanta Airport Monday, November the 25th. On Sunday, November the 17th, a week before, while we were at our son's house in Chattanooga, Brent and I noticed that Al, sitting on the sofa, began having very labored breathing, though he did not complain. We sent him by ambulance to Big Memorial Hospital, where he was admitted with congestive heart failure and severe anemia. He has had heart disease for years, but never this, and he's also had chronic anemia, but never this severe. Over the next 24 hours, he received 3 units of blood, 5 bags of IV iron. He was on oxygen. He received strong diuretics, which pulled the equivalent of 4 quarts of fluid off his body in 24 hours, if you can imagine. Monday noon, they rushed in and said they were moving him to another room where he would get 100% oxygen under pressure and for us to call our family. We nearly lost him Monday afternoon and evening. We called our daughter in Georgia, who's a teacher there. Joy and her friend arrived late that night, about midnight, and the nurse allowed them in with him. Joy asked him, did he want to go on and be with Jesus, or did he want to go to Israel? And he said he wanted to go to Israel. So our daughter is quite a prayer intercessor, as is her friend. And they went to war. I'm telling you, they went to war praying over him. She told me later, she said, I was not going to let the devil take my daddy just as he was about to fill a lifetime dream. Al had told all the staff that he was flying out the next Monday to Israel. Nobody said, you can't do that. They said that they would help him all they could. I struggled in my mind all week thinking how crazy this was to think about him when he was near death that week, about flying out to Israel the next week. But God gave me a word, and it was a strong word, and it was a word that many of you are familiar with. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not unto your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. The part that really was strong to me was lean not to your own understanding. In other words, though I was sitting there with him, watching him struggle to breathe at times and weak, I was not to focus on that. I was to focus on that God was going to bring his purposes out of this. That was hard. And my mind vacillated. I will tell you, back and forth thing, this is crazy. This is crazy to think about this. But God said, lean not unto my own understanding, but to trust in him. So we took day by day, as we're all commanded to do anyway. Slowly he improved, being out of bed only a couple of times a day, all week long. That's all he was out of bed. The next Sunday, a week later after he'd been admitted, the doc came dancing into the room waving his arms in the air, and he had some papers in his hand. And he said, I'm so happy. He said, his test results have come around to where I can discharge him today. He said, but he will have to be on portable oxygen. Oh, that was a shock. So we had to get the oxygen people in there from APREA and find out how to use, I had to find out how to use that portable oxygen. And that was a shock. Then our daughter had to find out about using that on the airplane. We didn't know that you can't just automatically take oxygen on an airplane. And she spent about half of the night working with the airlines to get permission to take portable oxygen on the airplane. So Al was discharged on Sunday afternoon, the 24th, a week after he had been admitted. And our son drove us then to Atlanta to a hotel near the airport that evening. And I asked Al again in the car, do you really want to do this? And yes, he wanted to do this. So we met our daughter there and her friend. One of her friends had already flown over. And so the next morning, I had to go over all Al's medicines, and I had to teach Joy how to use the oxygen thing, and then she had to measure his oxygen level with the little pulse oximeter that many of you are familiar with. And she did that faithfully. She's a wonderful caregiver, and she's a special ed teacher. And she did that all throughout the trip. She would even get up at night and check his oxygen level. And so we had talked as a family about what might happen if Al were to pass away over there on that trip. You know, you have to get honest about these things. Al is 89. And Al said it was okay with him if he went on to be with the Lord while he was in Israel. So I kissed him goodbye at the curb of the international airport the next morning. And Brent wheeled him on in the airport there with Joy and her friend. And he was on the plane to Israel less than 24 hours after he was discharged from the airport, from the hospital. Now, many people thought we were crazy for letting him go, tell you the truth. But it seemed the right thing for us as a family to do that. And we're so glad that we did. Joy FaceTimed with me every day on WhatsApp. I don't know if any of you are familiar with WhatsApp. But we talked nearly an hour, usually in the middle of the night. And she would show me around where they were, and I could see them and talk to them, and it was wonderful. And I took notes on what they said. The wonderful thing was that Al was able to be off of the oxygen after 3 days. And she had arranged ahead of time, before he had even been hospitalized, for him to use a little scooter over there. And he loved that scooter. He would like to have brought that home, I think. I was most blessed when one day he said to me, he was actually in bed with his eyes closed, but he said to me, I can feel the hand of God all over me, and I am so happy. I will never forget that. That was worth it all. And they had a blessed 2 weeks, and his strength increased, and he had a wonderful time. Now, I would need to tell you that the 2 weeks for me were wonderful too. I never have experienced such an incredible sense of joy and the presence of the Lord over a sustained period as I experienced those 2 weeks while they were gone. I can't explain it. I didn't get anything done I had planned to do. People were calling me and asking me how things were going, and every time I talked to them, I got higher and higher in the presence of the Lord. It was wonderful, and I'm just grateful. But I feel like that as a family, we all walked in a 3-week season of miracles. We're only telling you a basic story here. There are many details that we can't possibly tell you all tonight. But it was a season of miracles. Everybody who went on the trip had many challenges before the trip. It almost didn't happen for everybody. But once they got on Israeli soil, it was amazing how things smoothed out. So I praise God. I just praise God. Thank you.
Hang on just a second. I'm going to move this out of the way. It'll take just a minute to get out. One of our most important missions of the church is the rap ministry. So, pass this around.
I guess.
Are you on?
Am I on? All right. Well, this really was a lesson in miracles from beginning to end. Phil usually starts his Sunday school class by asking a question. Have you ever had a dream that didn't go away? That's what I would ask. It might come and go over a long period of time, or it might be a deep wish to make your life more complete that hasn't happened yet. It could be a problem unsolved in your life, a distant goal, a strong sin, a nagging desire that you have thought about since childhood or young adult, or even as a deep thought as a older person. Thoughts like these usually come from the Holy Spirit, I find, working within us. Jesus calling you to a belief and action far beyond your capacity to think about or what would happen to do when you do it by yourself. Well, such was that dream to go to Israel that I had. Our daughter knew of this dream. She had been there twice, and this was going to be her third time. And she loved every minute of it. After years of waiting, which you've already heard, schedules gelled, and a group was committed, 4 in number, and Joy purchased the tickets for our group to go. Each person had their challenge. Mine happened to be taking oxygen on 3 different flights in order to get there. My doctor said, I don't want you to take one flying trip. I want you to take it in hops. So that's what we did. But if you ever tried to take oxygen onto a plane and you didn't have the proper statements, you have another thought coming. And we didn't have all of our ones. We couldn't get it done in time. But our daughter went on anyway. And so we started in Atlanta. We went to Miami. And then we went to Madrid, Spain. And finally to Tel Aviv, Israel. Now, Joy is the one on our right there. She's the one who more or less engineered the trip, and Tammy on this other side. Her challenge was that she came within 2 days of going on the trip, with Joy having bought the ticket. She still needed $4,000. She had just a few $100s with her, and she needed that much more to complete the trip. Well, there was a friend in Houston, Texas, who went to breakfast that morning, 2 days before, and felt that she ought to help Tammy with it, and she sent a check for $4,000 for her trip. Well, that was one of the early miracles that happened for us as we were gathering starting in Tel Aviv, then we came to after a 2-hour trip from Tel Aviv, we went to the Galilee area, where we spent about 6 days there in Galilee, in the Galilee area. This is a new hotel. It's been there about 3 years or so, and we met lots of people from all over the world. They were really pilgrims that were coming and arriving with all kinds of language difficulties, but they'd sing and we'd understand the song part and miss the words. But it was really a wonderful time there, especially at breakfast, when we could have smorgasbord a la Supreme. This is the sea out of Galilee, out of our window or our outside there, and this was one of our first ones. It looked kind of distant to me, but over in this area was a whole grove of date trees, and I was enamored with those. And as I will share with you later, we have dates up here for everybody that is here, and I hope you'll get a date and enjoy a date from there. When we brought them back, all of them were pretty well confiscated by the agent in Boston when we were there, because we're not supposed to bring dates back in from anywhere, especially Israel. Now, I don't know how that came into being except as a lobbyist, but I got our group, was tucked in our travel place and wrapped up in all kinds of things, and I got through with mine. And now these that are up here in front that are for you, that we have here, are not from Israel, but they taste alike, they look alike, they're in every way very much like the ones in Israel. And Fresh Market in Chattanooga helped us get those. There's let's see here. When I got there at the hotel, Joy had arranged for a scooter, and that scooter was with us all 14 days that we were in Israel. I loved it, and I could go up and down and in and around anywhere with it, and you could take it apart, put it together in about 2 minutes. and you just put it in the back of your car, and you can get it ready whenever you want to take a little trip. And it could go as fast as any of you could run. And I tried to test it out as far as we could go. One of our first visits was with the Church of the Beatitudes, which for me was one of the most worshipful experiences in that whole area. It would the birds were singing there, the flowers were in bloom, and there were just all kinds of activities going on, including there was a group of pilgrims singing in a nearby building up ways, just a little ways, and we could hear music coming down and floating down into that area. And I just took my scooter and just moved around through the, and in the well, let's see, in the well, that's, I'm sorry, right there. That's the Sea of Galilee right there. And we were that close to it, and we could enjoy it in every way. But that Church of the Beatitudes was really the most worshipful experience, almost, that we had in all of Israel. This was inside the little chapel area there, and people could come, and there was sort of a place to kneel all the way around, and it was very, very worshipful in its way. Now, we saw the gardens and had really an interesting time, even though it was in December, the last part of November. And this was sort of toward the midnight, or as it was late, almost a sunset, I guess. The Sea of Galilee is about 13 miles north and south, and 8 miles east and west, and about 600 feet deep in the middle. And when we took a boat ride around the lake or the sea, we would hug the edges. We wouldn't go into the center in case there was any problem there. We would have about 100 people or so on each of these boats. There were about 3 or 4 of them at the time circulating. And we had a guide for our 4 of us, and as he was waving us off from the pier, he dropped the keys to my scooter, and into the sea they went. And if you can imagine what it took to move that scooter a quarter of a mile up from where we took the boat through the little store that they had there for books and all kinds of issues, then to the parking lot, and then to our vehicle. It took 3 people to push me with the cart, but anyway, we made it. And he, in his own time, took it to. He drove his car to a friend, Hebrew, who made a key to fit that that scooter and then brought it back to us the next morning. So that was a real blessed time. Our next venture was up to the Golden Heights, which is to the northern part of Israel. As some of you have heard, our president was talking about the fact of it ought to be under the control of the Israelis. And when we got there, I was about 40 feet from the line into Syria, with a little barbed wire that they had separating Israel and Syria. But then there were some 30 soldiers having lunch almost really at that point. One colonel, 2 majors, and about 27 lieutenants. And Joy didn't know any stranger. And when we got there, we were into the sort of little restaurant, and she went over to the group and said, I have a person, 89 years old, who would like to meet you and talk with you for a few minutes. He had a dream that he wanted to, in coming to Israel. And they, when I walked over, they all stood up, and it was amazing. It surprised me that that would take place. The elderly people in Israel, especially in that area, were honored, and I did not know that, and had a chance to talk and give my testimony to the medical person who was there in that group. Now, this is Megiddo. Some of you would know what Megiddo is. That's the point of, in your scripture, you'll see it is in Revelation 16, verse 16. It talks about the last big battle in Armageddon, and that's where we had a chance to look out over that area. You can see right in here a large area of trees that, and I'm not sure whether they were date trees or banana trees that they grow. You know, they can turn things into minimum kind of, we look at big palm trees or big trees for dates and that type of thing, but these are stubbed into smaller areas. And this is very flat land as far as you can see. Let's see, wait a minute, we get here. There. That's 2 pictures together trying to make that. That's where the Battle of Armageddon is going to be fought. And they keep saying that's where the blood will be as high and the desecration will be as high as the horses mantled right there. And as far as you can see, one account gives 180 miles out in that direction. It's also, there's a road right here, comes around, and that goes to Jerusalem. And the other one going north would go to Syria. And it's a very nice communication center when you stop and think about it. We wound up our area mostly in that with that attendance. Someone asked me, were we ever scared or were we ever concerned in Israel for our safety. And I would say, why, no, we didn't have a care in the world. We were with near people who were very well, shall I say, fortified with guns or rifles or whatever. We could look over into Syria and we could see just farmland and nothing in the way of a disturbance of any kind. I never saw a single disturbance while we were over there. Let me see here. Now, we took a road, we took our trip after 6 days. We went down south of Jerusalem, more or less, to Bethlehem. And there we went in to kneel at the spot that Jesus was born. Now, some of you say, well, how would you know? Well, the Romans marked that particular spot. And so that's a very real truth of going there. However, when we got there, we were in, of course, Palestinian areas, and we had, thank goodness, we had a Palestinian Christian, if you can believe that, as a guide. And he knew around, how to get around. And there were hundreds of people, hundreds of people waiting to put their hand to the point of where Jesus was born. And they were lined up, zigzag like a snake, waiting to do it. And through his guidance, he got permission for us to go down the exit area where people come out of. And we went down in less than 10 minutes. We were in there, and I was putting myself touching. And we have one area here, which some of you might want to see later, is a picture of what it is. It's the Eastern Orthodox. That's a star of their group, and they were in charge of the huge temple that this was surrounding. And people would come down and just put their hand. We'd put our hand down there and touch that very spot, knowing that was really a moment to understand. Now we came back to Bethlehem, to Jerusalem, and we stayed in the oldest church in the eastern area there, and it was a tremendous blessing because as we would go to breakfast, we would see and talk with and have fellowship with people from all over the world. And it was, and they knew English that were there. Most of them did anyway. And the food was delightful. It was very the food we had, by the way, in Galilee, we had fish that had been caught just hours ahead of time. And there are two kinds of fish there. Tilapia, which we are familiar with, and then they have another fish which is unique to that group alone. It's a very sweet fish. It's not tight like your catfish is here, but it's kind of loose, and it has a very fine taste to it. We enjoy that very much. That that guest house was all we would want in terms of accommodations. And right next door to it is that church. And though we didn't have time to go to a church service there, we did go to that the last day we were there. And that was, now, one of the things that we did was to go to the Wailing Wall, or the Western Wall, which many of you have seen or heard. This is the closest to the original Holy of Holies. It's the outer wall, actually, where people come. The men go on one side, the ladies go over here on the other side, and this here I am touching the wall, and we have this one here. One of my friends stuck a dollar bill into the wall, and he got some of the dirt that is on the olive area in the where the oldest olive trees are on the other side, and presented that to me when he got back from Israel. Let's see here. Yeah. Now, in this area, right over, coming in this area, is a covered area in which I went in for just a brief time. They were having all of the Israel books from the Bible that they knew, and in the Old Testament, muchly used, and they had chairs in front of the wall, and they were going back and forth, and it was both interesting and sad that they didn't know Jesus, and I kind of winced over that because there were so many people who were mourning in that area, but it's usually very crowded with people, and one of the times that we had a direct relationship, the Hebrews have a camera on that 24 hours a day, every day of the year. And so when I took my scooter there and got close, we Skyped with Dee, and she could see me touching the wall and praying and using that time as a prayer time to do that. Now, another time the next place we went to was the Knesset, where, of course, that's sort of like our Congress, was where we met one of the high-ranking individuals there in the Knesset. Now, right there is where where the prime minister sits, and the president sits up here. And I didn't know the difference between the two, but the guide here explained that the president, his whole idea is to keep order. They get kind of rambunctious there, and in debates and all kinds of things, and he has to keep order, and then also to plan special events. Our vice president spoke to that group, standing right. Well, he came actually right to there, and spoke in 2018 to the Knesset. And there is a wall, a balcony that comes all the way around to where we are here. And our little group was right in here, and he was explaining to us all of the actions of the Knesset. To get into the Knesset is a half hour of rigorous talking and search of any individual who is visiting there. It was still a very important place for us to visit, and I think you would want to include that in any kind of group action you wanted to see. Well, let's see. Now, the next place that we wanted to take a review, this is in Caiaphas' house, the high priest of Israel at that time. This is the single hole. Wait a minute. Got me back here. Excuse me. I get. Oh, okay, there. This was a hole here. We had to go down 100 steps to get there from where Caiaphas lived. Now, I had a second thought of whether I wanted to go down 100 steps, but I didn't want to miss out on anything, so I did. This is essentially a round hole there with one drop where Jesus was probably, after he was arrested, he was taken here and dropped into this hole. And he was lowered there. Now, other prisoners over here are used. There are straps coming down from the top of the ceiling there, where hands are held up as high, and they're strapped there. And then there's a weight on his feet. And so they're used, and this is where they beat them. And then they put them into the hole. And there is an area right in where I'm touching here, where there's an imprint of blood left that they have outlined there. I don't know what prisoner or what they had there, but this was a real sort of death hole. People sometimes would go crazy because there was no light. The only light was in that hole. Now, it looks like there's a band around there, but that has to do with some, that they have fortified that around there so that you have to look down here to the hole, which is right in that area. And it's about 12, 15 feet that a person is dropped through that one hole. And that's where they're kept. punishment in that day and age was quite different from it is today. And you get a sense of the severity of it in just that line. This is on the western side of the Kindred Valley, and you can now cross the valley is the Damascus Gate, which is we hear a lot of, I've got my gates here. There. This fella right here, we put him in here because he's offering dates to you. And I'm offering you dates. We have dates up here. I hope you'll get a date before you're through here. I wanted some kind of chance to let you eat a little bit and enjoy a date from it's not from Israel, but it tastes like it. It acts. It's shaped like it, and it's really identical to it as much as we could get. And I kind of wanted you to enjoy some of that. The Damascus Gate, you can see it from Caiaphas's home or his house, and you can look right straight across, and that's the street that Jesus took his cross up to Golgotha, and the street is very narrow. It's not much wider than this aisle going back and forth, which is really tremendous. Here I had my little scooter, and I was trying to get through all kinds of people. This was a crowded situation with vendors on either side, and I tried to get right over here a little bit, but I guess my scooter would part people as I would come along. They'd kind of get off to the side, but on either side there were all kinds. Up here there are animals for sale. I mean, meat really for sale there. Now over here is I enjoyed coming to this shopkeeper who and I had. We were taken there, and he sold cloth to the upper echelons in Israel and across the Mediterranean area. He showed us a white and gold cloth that the Pope had come in to buy, and it was under a cover. I couldn't quite touch it, but I could almost do it. He said it was $1,100 for what he bought there, and I said, "Oh, well, that was kind of in." So I said, "What else do you have that would fit my pocketbook?" And he brought out about 10 or 15 of these table cloths there, and I have not said how much I had to pay for it, but it was about one of 15 or 16 of them, and we chose that one as a right. And he has many things in his shop that I think would interest any of the folks here. Now, we went into Gethsemane, and this was our way of seeing the Garden of Gethsemane, where 2,000 to 3,000 year old olive trees existed. And they had been harvested just before we got there. They were still active. And I, too, wonder how you might fare with fruit in your old age, like they had. This is in Psalm 92, 14, that talks about the old trees, and that is where this is. Now we come to the tomb, and we have a picture of it right here. Wait a minute, I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, there is the tomb that is said to have been there. There's some question about that. This is by far the most worshipful group. Part of a visit. I have a very good friend who is an archaeologist, and he is questioning this place. But this is where a large group say it happened. We went into the tomb. It's a very unusual experience for you to go into what could be Jesus' tomb. You have all kinds of thoughts that kind of think, you think, what in the world could I think or say in that kind of a setting? And then we came out and we had communion. We took communion. And I read the scripture right there in John, and we served it. We served. And I have several of these cups here that are made out of olive wood. And these are given to everybody who wishes to take communion and have communion there. Now, down on this side over here, about 30 feet or more, is a bus station with about 40 different buses there, and they've kept it pretty well isolated, and it didn't harm us at all in our thinking there. We did go to the other area where is more the traditional place where Jesus was born, rather, not died, and which is fairly close to this. And that is a little group, is a little church or chapel inside of a huge temple. And you have to bend way down in order to get into that spot. And when you come out, you're almost doubled over. And they intended for you to do that because they want that bowing to be a part of your experience there. As we went around that temple, one of the interesting things, they had different areas segmented off in the bigger temple there. They had the huge column in which which Jesus had his hands locked around the column, and they would beat him in that sense from in that there. Now we come to Masada. We're off to Masada. I don't know what you would have, what you would think or say about going to the empty tomb of Jesus. Pilgrims sing familiar songs, but their words are different. They're, of course, from different languages. But we had to leave there, and off we went to Masada. And this is an aerial view of Masada. This is at the top of it. This is at the front end of it. The castle here, there's a group of castles that Herod the Great made, and he never lived there, but he was using that as a place for his to escape death, he and his family. So the Romans wanted to catch. Well, let me see. On the top there, up there, were 960 Hebrews. That's women, children, and men. They lived on that bluff or that mountain peak there, and then this right here is the rampart that was built coming up that one when the Romans wanted to. The only way they could get to those 960 people was to build a ramp. Now over here is the encampment of slaves that built it, and on the right, on over here on the left side, is where the Roman where they had their encampment, and it was really a struggle. That's where the Romans got most of their got their attitude of never allowing anything to take place. They would defeat anybody who was coming, and they were out to get these 960 people who were Hebrews, and they would come up and they built it. As they finished building it, and by the way, I mean back up there, right up there were a group of rocks, or that could be they were piled up there, and they would move those over and let them release down and go down to the to kill the people who were building this rampart, and so many were killed at that level. Now we come to the fortress. Well, no, that's a little bit ahead. The brass often took from. Well, let me back up. The the 960 people who were Hebrews desired to die rather than to be taken as slaves to Rome. And that became a cry for the Hebrews, especially when, and now, they take new recruits and their new soldiers, they take them up there to Masada and show them what it takes never to give up. And they would rather die than to become slaves. That was one of the important areas that Hebrews use today in their training of the military. Well, all of these events, these are camels that were along the way in various places. You can ride them, and you can talk. You can talk to the people who care for them. I wanted to share with you that all of these events on the trip have drawn me closer to God. I learned afresh that the challenge is to stay teachable, to remain flexible, to be passionate for Jesus. I mean passionate for Jesus, and to be dependent upon God, and to be repentant, and never to give up. Those are the things that I have picked up, and they've been very close to me since. Now, recently, I viewed a program on public TV called Violins of Hope. It was about violins being repaired from those who played at Dachau. And as prisoners came and were marched to the gas chambers, inside Dachau there was this symphony orchestra that was playing to them. The master violin restorer in Tel Aviv repaired some 46 of these violins that were used at Dachau. And some 28 of those were brought over to Cleveland, Ohio, and shared with young people and adults for a special concert. And as I viewed that, the music goes on, said the director. You can't kill the Jewish faith. It was alive, even though those who had played them were dead. And I also thought right now that there are politicians, and you pardon me with this thought, there are politicians working in our country to divide it and to change our country. You and I can make a change by praying His word and standing for what is right. Don't just say God is in control. That's, for some, that's a cop-out for me. I know that's true, but I can change things by what I do in prayer and how I can stand for what is right. God needs our time, and He needs our hands, and He needs our minds, and He needs our heart. And I would leave you with this question. Is your dream big enough? And what is your next steps to make this dream go forward? That's my question to you as you think about your life in this country. It's great to be free, and it's coming at a price, and that price is being lifted up now for us Christians who must take a stand. I can't tell you what this has really meant to me, to be able to come and to keep faith with such a group of Christians as in this church. This is an unusual church. And as I look upon other churches, and I have for a long time, even in this community, they don't speak the word. They don't teach the word. They don't have the fellowship. They are not praying people like you. And I'm just encouraging you to say and think and do what you have been taught. We have to do that as Christians. And with that, I'll turn it over to
God bless you for being able to finally make that trip that you dreamed about all your life. That's just an amazing thing. And, you know, the nation of Israel is just an amazing place, isn't it? I mean, it's amazing to me that all of this evidence of the birth of Christianity in the nation of Israel, and they still go to that Wailing Wall every day and pray for their Messiah. And evidence of him is all around them, right? And they just ignore that. So we need to pray for the Jewish people, and we need to pray for Israel, because as Al showed us a lot of the sites, that's where it's going to culminate. That's where Jesus is going to come back, right there in that place. And as a matter of fact, Al showed you the very place that final battle is going to take place. So we need to continue to pray for those folks, and we need to continue to try to spread our faith to those people, even though they kind of put up a wall for Christianity and for Jesus. But we're going to continue that discussion next month on the missions night next month in March, third Wednesday of next month. And I'm going to drill into that a little bit and talk